Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We're glad that you're joining us today as we discuss advocacy and how to get involved with advocacy and what works best for us. Today we have our Director of Advocacy, Christy Carter-Bake, and we have Emily Whitcomb, who is our advocacy administrator, who are going to be speaking to us today and give us some tips and ideas and maybe some updates, if they have any, on some of the current areas of advocacy where MWEG is involved. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Christy and Emily. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Or Christy, if people want to come off mic to ask questions. You guys good with that? So feel free to jump in with questions if you have any as they are presenting.
Thanks, Rachel, and we're excited to be here today. It's been a minute since I've had the pleasure of doing a grow with you all. So we wanted to come talk about finding joy in advocacy. It's maybe kind of a tough time and a tough topic, and so we just thought it would be a really timely thing to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen. We have these lovely slides, the credit for which mostly goes to Emily, who is here with me today. I am hoping this will work. This seems to be working. Working for people? Okay. So the idea here is to be intentional about how we engage with advocacy and how we engage with the news cycle and all sorts of things that are going on in our world today. So thinking about our purpose and being proactive about creating community and engaging in a way that is sustainable to you as an individual. So there are a lot of challenging things that we're all engaging with on a daily basis, right? We have this kind of contentious and loud political climate. We have all these platforms where all these voices are seeming to shout at us. We, in advocacy, we're, or send letters, emails, and giving you the information you need to do that. But even with all of our efforts, all of your efforts, all of ours, we sometimes feel like progress is slower than we would like, or we don't feel like our voices are being heard by our elected officials. And combining that with just the weight of everything that's going on in the world, it can be kind of a downer. And so if we are going to continue in this work, which we need to continue in, we are going to have to be really thoughtful about how we approach it and how we integrate it into our lives in a way that doesn't just completely burn us out and make it so that we can't sustain these practices on a daily basis. So we wanted to talk quite a bit more about how important joy is as a component of our lives generally, right? But also specifically when we're engaging in advocacy and engaging with all of these complicated and heavy topics, that we are really cultivating joy alongside that so that we can keep going. So joy is absolutely necessary. Joy keeps us grounded. Again, it prevents us from completely burning out and having mental and physical health consequences. Not all of them, obviously, but the ones that come from burnout. And it helps reconnect us with our why and why we are doing the work that we're doing. We have this lovely illustration of a well-rooted and stable tree getting the nutrients it needs, getting the light that it needs, able to persist against the winds and the storms and the things that come. So one of the big things that we need to highlight and talk about is that joy cannot be contingent upon success in advocacy. Joy needs to run alongside it in our lives. And if we go into advocacy with everything riding on a certain outcome, we're probably going to be disappointed. And advocacy is just kind of like many other things in our lives. Like, right, you don't ever think this one thing in my life is going to be the source of joy and accomplishment and fulfillment. Anytime you do that, you're probably going to be disappointed. You're probably going to feel some burnout when that doesn't come to pass. So just keeping the perspective that advocacy is one part of our lives. It's an important thing that we engage in on our own behalf and on the behalf of people who need support and amplification, but it isn't there. It's not something we engage with simply because we want a sense of accomplishment or because we need a certain outcome to feel good about ourselves or good about what we did. So even in chaos and uncertainty, joy can exist, is valid, and help shift your perspective. It's easy to get really bogged down in all the things that are going on right now and think, I can't feel joy or I shouldn't feel joy. It would be wrong to be happy about something or to celebrate, a small victory in the face of a larger defeat. But that is not a sustainable way to engage in advocacy or just the world generally. So some examples we came up with is you run in a marathon and you worked really hard and you trained really hard and you didn't win, or maybe you didn't even make your best time, or you didn't do as well as you had hoped to do, but you can still find joy and fulfillment in the fact that you worked hard, you did your best, you did something challenging and you got through it. So you don't necessarily need the victory or even to do as well as you hoped to still be able to appreciate how you grew and how you were changed by the process and what you learned so that you can regroup and go back again next time. An example for us, we were working really hard both with our grassroots efforts, our calls to action, and then behind the scenes with our federal legislators during both the reconciliation and the rescission process. But during rescission, specifically, we were working really hard on PEPFAR, which is a foreign aid program helping people get their AIDS medication. And it's specifically focused on maternal and infant populations. So it's a really important program. It's had broad bipartisan support in the past. And in the rescission bill, there were really large cuts to that program. And we worked really hard to educate our officials about what this meant, about the history of the program. And at the end of the day, they ended up removing the PEPFAR cuts from the rescission package. So even though the rescission package passed, that may not have been our first choice for an outcome. We did succeed in helping to get the PEPFAR provisions, the PEPFAR cuts removed from the rescission bill. And so it is important to celebrate the small victories, even though overall we wish we might have had a different outcome in rescission generally. So it was about focusing our efforts in a place that we felt like we could really make a difference, and we were able to, even though rescission generally passed and some other really important programs were cut. No, my computer is not working. So other things to help keep advocacy in perspective is that advocacy is almost always a slow process. Very, very rare is the story where someone just decides to change something, shows up, and is in short order able to change it. Advocacy is a long, long game. And with that perspective, that can help us make room for joy in our lives and have fewer feelings of disappointment because we know that we're probably not going to come in and make an immediate huge impact. But it's just these little chippings away of of the change that we're trying to make. So if it seems hard, then that's because it is hard. And that's just the perspective that we have to take with advocacy generally. Change is slow, but it's real. And if you feel like it's becoming overwhelming, it's time to step back and reflect, think about what you've learned, re-strategize, rest, and get some fresh perspective and be ready to come back again. So I know a lot of you have written a lot of letters through our CTA tools or even outside of them. And it might feel like you're not making much headway, um, but you probably are more than you think. And so it's just advocacy is a good analogy with the marathon, right? Like you have to keep going. Sometimes you're going to be tired. Sometimes you're going to have to push through uncomfortable spots. But it's a consistent showing up and taking care of yourself so that you're able to do that. And that's where we really start to make some headway with advocacy.
Okay, yeah, I'll
Turn it
take
over to Emily.
the next parts. So I think that one of the biggest ways that we can try and because I think it's one thing to say, this is like a really hard thing to do. I'm feeling very unmotivated. I don't think that what I'm doing is like making any sort of progress in some kind of way. Um, And it's easy to say like, oh, just find joy in what you're doing. But I feel like the way that we can find or rediscover joy maybe that we once had is reconnecting with your why. Why did you get involved in the first place? So we want to go to the next slide. Um, I would like for all of you to take the time to consider the questions that I'm going to put up here. So the first one is what brought you here? Why do you want to be an advocate? Was there a certain moment or an experience that inspired you or ignited some kind of fuel within you to lift your voice? Was it seeing some kind of injustice that you're experiencing or someone close to you is experiencing? Why are you an advocate? The next one is what are you hoping to build? What's a personal outcome that you hope to see as a result of your advocacy work? Maybe this is something more general, maybe it's specific to a certain issue. Either one is great. And then the last one is what personal values or beliefs drive your advocacy work? What what makes you want to do this? I know at MWEG, one of the big values is being ethical. It's in the name. And so that's a value that drives a lot of the advocacy work that we do. Um, and so as you consider these questions and maybe write down responses to them, I invite you to keep these responses in a place that you know where they are so you can turn back to them in times of discouragement, and kind of keep them as your advocacy mantra, as a way to remember that, yeah, I'm doing this for a purpose and this purpose is worth it. So there are a lot of different ways to advocate. And there are a lot of different ways that we can find joy. And I think it's important that we find an intersection between something that brings us joy, just like normally, like separate from advocacy, and finding an advocacy action that excites you. Because you're not going to find joy in doing something that you think is boring or something that you think is arduous or something that you feel like you're not really good at. Um, so on this next slide, there's a lot of text here, and I'm not going to go through all of it. So I invite you to either take a screenshot or take a picture of it, so you can look into this chart a little bit more. But this chart just kind of splits up and has a big list of different things that you can do to advocate, split up into different like activities. So while looking through this list, I would like you to consider what are some of the topics or things that you're passionate about. Maybe within like one of MWEG's areas of advocacy, is there something that you feel knowledgeable about or something that you have personal experience with that you often, speak up about? Maybe it's something to do with immigration. Maybe it has something to do with family health or advancing democracy or the environment. Once you find like a topic that you're passionate about, consider what type of activity is going to give you energy. What what's something that you commonly want to do? Do you like writing? Do you want to write a letter? Do you want to write an op-ed? Um, do you like gathering or being in community with other people? Maybe that means you have discussions with others where you're sharing your ideas and your opinions. Um, do you like engaging on social media with different topics and sharing things that you've learned? Um, and the last thing I'd like for you all to consider is what kind of talents do you have? What's something that comes natural to you, and what's something you feel like you're good at? These are all simple things that I feel like can help you find joy in advocacy work that you're doing. Because there are so many different things that you can do as displayed in this chart. And then the last thing that we're going to go over are some tips for avoiding burnout in advocacy work. As Chrissy mentioned and was talking about, it's easy to get discouraged in what we're doing because the climate of advocacy work to me, I feel like sometimes it just feels very extreme. And so I feel like I sometimes get burned out and I don't want to do it anymore because I'm like, this isn't bringing me fulfillment, or I just feel very unmotivated. And so I invite you to try and implement some of these tips in your life. So the first one is sharing the load and advocating with other people. I think being in a community is a very valuable thing that sometimes we forget that we have. We're all part of various communities, whether that's in a family, in a religious setting, in a work setting, in a social setting. We have all of these people around us who we have built relationships with, and it's always easier to do things with other people because it lightens the load. So consider advocating with those around you or sharing your advocacy work with people within your community. The next one is celebrating small wins. As earlier mentioned, advocacy is a long and sometimes slow process. Sometimes it's fast. Usually it's not, I feel like. And so it's important that throughout the lifespan of something that you're advocating for, you recognize that there are small things that you're doing to make progress. For example, the PEPFAR example that Christy had shared earlier, that was a small win that we had made earlier this month. Numbers 3 and 4, I feel like go along with each other. So setting boundaries for yourself and taking breaks is super important. This is one that I am figuring out how to better implement just because this is my full-time job. And so I put a lot of time into advocacy work. And so I have to figure out what are good boundaries for myself. When do I allow myself to like look at the news maybe outside of work, or do I allow myself to look at the news when I'm not working? When am I using social media? When, like, how am I going to give my brain a rest from something that might seem very um, chaotic at times? And so setting boundaries for yourself is a really good way to create a more sustainable cadence in doing advocacy work. And then the last one is prioritizing rest on the weekends or not necessarily just the weekends, but like periods of rest that you have aside for yourself. Maybe that's a moment in the morning or in the evening. That could look like a set aside like walk time that you have for yourself, reading a book, doing something with your hands like a puzzle, or I like crocheting. So that's like something that I can do to take my mind off of, chaos that seems to be going on that's all around me. So it can be a little overwhelming to maybe try and apply all 5 of these at once. So I invite you to pick maybe one of them to start doing to try to mitigate any burnout you might be feeling from doing advocacy work. And then we'll leave you with this small saying. And I think this is just something that Christy said to me in a meeting. And I was like, wow, that feels very powerful. So you don't get involved in activism because things are great. You get into it because you see some kind of injustice and want to do something about it. So I just invite you all to remember that, as you know, advocating is hard and it can be discouraging and it can feel very slow, but you're doing it for a reason and you have this purpose and this drive that exists somewhere within you, or else you wouldn't be on this call, and you wouldn't be writing letters to your legislators. So just remember that why and find something that brings you joy in advocacy work so that it can become a more sustainable and joyful action. And that's all we have. So thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Christy or Emily about advocacy or about this presentation? Questions how to get involved? No questions.
I'll just
All
say
right.
thank you for like all the hard work that you guys do to put together the information for our calls to action, because that's one of the things that I love about MWEG and that I love to share with other people is that when I see an issue, I might not know a lot about it and I'll hear a little bit. And I know that if I read the MWEG call to action, it's going to give me good background information and links to other information so that if I like when I often see something and I'm like, I got to do something about it, but I don't know enough to talk about it intelligently. But I know if I read the MWEG CTA, I will become more informed and then I can confidently, write something where I feel like I'm not just, being like, I heard about this because I read 2 headlines and I'm mad about it, but I can actually write something reasonable. So thanks for all the work that you and your team do to make it easy for the rest of us to be more informed and to advocate intelligently and, you know, with confidence.
Thank you, Jalaire. I really liked your comment you put in the chat as well, which is that it can be disappointing. It is discouraging when things don't change, but it's more discouraging if you didn't try and do anything about it. So yes, definitely biased towards action. Anyone else?
And there are a lot of really great, maybe if we can get just a copy of that slide, that image on the slide of the different types of advocacy, and we can post that with the recording in the Grow recording space on Central so that people have that quickly, or we can put it in the discussion space for some people to look at, because that had a lot of really great suggestions. I also think that the summer program, like the bingo card, has some really great suggestions of some of the ways we connect with people will help us drive our advocacy, especially for connecting with different groups that are maybe like marginalized groups, where we get to know people, then it becomes personal and it helps us relate those stories. Like Jalaire said, when we have a little more information or some sort of personal experience when we're writing our CTAs, then we can share that too. And if we can connect with some of the communities that we're advocating for, then we can share those experiences as well. So that's really important. But if there's no, let's see, there's a couple other things in the chat.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, I can now.
I had a question. I'm not sure if my computer is working right. So one thing I was wondering about, does anybody have any experience with Indivisible or working with them? Because I get a lot of emails from them. as an advocacy group?
We are aware of them. I usually leave it to our state level directors to do a lot of the coordination on that. So if you let us know where you live, I can find out.
Sure. I'm in Virginia. I'm Sharon. Hi, Christy.
Oh, hey, Sharon.
Yeah.
I know
So
you.
yeah, didn't know how to quite get my my name up correctly. So
Yeah, let me just circle back with you, Sharon.
mm,
I can also say I've had a little bit of experience with our local Indivisible group, and I do think that they're a national organization and they have some national coordination, but a lot is they're also very local. And so I
mhm,
think it's kind of like just because one, like you might find your local one is really great. You might find that your local one is really active on issues that are maybe not that you don't align with as much. And so
mhm,
like my experience is that some of, you kind of just have to feel out the local group and see if you feel like, yeah, they're doing stuff I like. I like these people. We feel aligned. Or you might go and be like, they're a little more intense than I want, or they're advocating for issues I don't care about as much, or that, and so I think my experience is that they've been a great group to really get people involved, but you might have to feel out your local group. So
mm.
that's my only
Yeah,
experience. And I'm
I
in
know.
Colorado, so
Oh, okay, yeah, and they
And
do a
that's,
lot. I mean, of course, they coordinate all the big rallies too, the big marches, and those are good.
yeah, that's why
Yeah.
we usually leave it to like our local leaders to kind of make those
Mhm.
connections and decide whether they want to amplify some of those other groups, because they're a better judge of what's happening in their
Yeah.
areas. So,
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, then we will close out today's Grow and just thank all of you for joining us and thank Christy and Emily for the information that they shared today. We invite you guys to join us next week. We are going to talk about the Moving Closer program and things that sustain us and how we can continue some of the pieces of the summer program that we've learned from or that we can carry throughout the year, and like today with our advocacy work and just in moving in closer into our communities. So if you'll join us next week, we have our Director of Communities, Michael M. Pello, who will join us next week. So thanks all for being here. We'll see you next time.
thank you.